Good morning, guys. I wanted to put a review online for the next lab exam because I'm not there to show you some of these details. These things are taking up to 16 hours to load right now, so be patient. I'll probably give you notification that it's going to be coming, but just be patient. And I'll put the link in the announcement, so it is that link. If you type in that link, it should take you to the YouTube video. So our next lab is over urinary, endocrine, and reproductive, and that is going to be on the 28th, I believe. So the urinary, I've edited the lab manual. This is the new lab manual, but I wanted to just show you some of these structures. Each of these have, I think, a little bit of a list to them, but very important here, I'm going to put a chart, sort of like a chart for the endocrine system for Chapter 13 lecture and lab, and it's going to be sort of like I did for the nervous system last semester. I'm going to just kind of put the gland, the appropriate hormones, and some other things, and I'll post that later today, hopefully. If not, it'll be this evening, but it'll post immediately, most likely, when I put it on. So our first exercise in the lab would have been urinary system. I do have a list that spells some of these for you, so hopefully that will help. Where is my, give me a second, I can't find my thing to, what is wrong with this? Okay, there it is. That disappeared. All right, our first picture is just a very simple picture. There's several lines, so I just wanted to, and I'm going to go through this quickly, so try to stay up. Renal artery and renal vein, you can look those up. Again, the artery's red, the vein's blue. This just shows the basic structures of the urinary system. This line here, which is pointing right at the bottom of the left kidney, that is the left kidney. The next line down is the ureter. You have two of those, ureters, but that's the ureter. Then you have the bladder. This next to the last line is the urinary bladder, or just bladder. And then this line is indicating the urethra at the end. So again, I apologize for going through this quickly, but the quicker we can get these done, the quicker they'll load. And like I said, 16 hours is a long time. On this particular diagram, I can show you some things, but I won't test you on them here. So I'm just going to show you what might be on the test to make it easier. In fact, you can probably scratch renal artery and vein off that last diagram, because if I showed it to you, it'd probably be on a diagram like this. The renal artery, the renal vein, the ureter. I like this here because it's cut and peeled back. This is the capsule of the kidney. Now, there's all these other structures, but I'm not going to waste time on those. But you can look in your text. I would really encourage you to look in your text at pictures like this if they're in there. Some of these pictures aren't in your text, to show you the different regions in here that I'm going to show you on the next diagrams. There's a lot of structures on the kidney. So the terminology, you know, for the most part, I'm not going to be able to make this smaller or larger, but for the most part in 139 in the lab, we've had a lot of laxity in our structures. We've had less anatomy, more physiology. This is an exception. There's a lot of parts of this kidney when we cut it, and obviously this is a sagittal section. So let me just go through this. This whole outer portion, and it's not uncommon, we talked about that it's listed in chapter 16. I guess we didn't lecture on that, but the outer part of the lymph node was called the cortex. Well, it's the same way here. This whole region is called the cortex. This region is called the medulla. So the inner part is a medulla, the outer part's cortex. Not uncommon to glands, and the kidney actually functions as a gland sometimes, an endocrine gland. All right, within the medulla, you will see these, this looks like a funnel is what it is. And that's kind of what the kidney cleans out your blood. It filters the blood. It creates urine from the waste of what's in the blood. But so what you have, it looks like the top of a funnel, if you know what a funnel is, and then here's the stem. So these upside down triangles here are actually called pyramids. They're within the region of the medulla, But if I put an A right on one of those and say, what's this structure? What's that structure? That is a pyramid. The entire region is the medulla. So keep that in mind. The top of that funnel comes down and filters into one of these. Here's one that's been cut off. I like that. It's the top's cut off. Here's a minor calyx. There's another minor calyx. That would be a minor calyx. This one is nice because it shows two of those, two minor calyx, flowing into a major calyx. So that is a major calyx. This would be a major calyx up in here. But that one is a good place to show you this. A minor, and a major calyx. Those will empty in, all those will empty into number 4 on this diagram, which is the renal pelvis. And then that's going to narrow to form the ureter again. So again, that's kind of quick, but hopefully you can watch this as many times as you want. So I think I can be a little quicker on the video so you can go back and watch it. Sorry, I just skipped by something. Okay, this is the same view that we just saw, but just a little bit more highlighted of a certain area here. So on this one, probably what I could ask you is, what's this? Renal pelvis. What's that? That's a pyramid. Or what is one of these? Minor calyx. Or what's that? A major calyx. That's probably all I would ask you on that particular view. Some of this will be repetitive, but repetition is good. Okay, again, we have another view of this. It's the same view, but we've gone down a little bit farther. Here, sometimes I like to ask you, what is this region? That is the cortex. What is that? That's a pyramid. That's a pyramid. Minor calyx, minor calyx. I wouldn't ask the major calyx, it's cut off. Let's go on. All right, now what we've done here, we've taken a cut out of the top of the kidney. Don't label these, I'll tell you what to label, but this is the capsule up here. So this is a section down through the kidney. This one is indicative of the cortex. This bracket is the medulla, but that's not what I'm after on this. What we're looking at, the functional unit of the kidney is the nephron. This is actually what filters your blood, and there's thousands and thousands of these. So this entire bracket is a nephron. You do not need to know that either. But I want you to know the parts of the nephron here. So we're going to start right here at the top line. This is the collecting duct. Then you have a line here, which is showing this twisty turning part. This is the proximal convoluted tubule. It is proximal to this part here. And what this part is, here is the second line. This is the glomerular capillaries, or glomerulus. That is part of that whole pod, which is called a renal corpuscle. This is where the terminology in the kidney gets really hard. So again, the renal corpuscle is a combination of the capillaries inside and the capsule outside. They're showing this with the top of the capsule cut off so you can see the capillaries. So again, the whole thing's the corpuscle. You have the capillaries inside, which are called the glomerular capillaries or glomerulus, and then you have Bowman's capsule around that. So on this line, I would prefer you say glomerular capillaries or glomerulus, but if you want to say renal corpuscle, that's fine too. The next line down is showing you this other tortuous turning part. That is the distal convoluted tubule. Proximal meaning closer to the point of attachment, remember, of this pod. There's the proximal. Then we come down through this bracket here showing you the loop of Henle, also known as the nephron loop. Loop of Henle, capital H-E-N-L-E, that is a proper name, or nephron loop. Then it comes back to this distal convoluted tubule, and you can see it runs over and goes into the collecting duct. That's when it's urine, and it's now going to go down into the minor calyx and on out through the eventually through the urethra. And again, we can't, I hate that we can't lecture on all these. Like I said, these are taking 16 hours to upload. Now, what this shows you is that nephron unit. Sometimes I'll just put, name the structural unit of the kidney, and it's the nephron, and right there it is. There's a picture of a couple of them, actually. And you can see where the collecting duct is coming down here into a minor calyx. That's why the pyramids look like they have little striations in them. It's all these collecting ducts coming down. It is truly funneling that urine out. All right, let's go on. to this one. Now this one, sometimes I just like to ask, what are the little white pods here? Now here shows you one with the pod cut off, and again, these are glomerular capillaries, or the glomerulus. The pod around it is the Bowman's capsule. So if it has the whole pod, really that's a renal corpuscle. Or if you say Bowman's capsule, that's fine, because the pod, the capsule around it is Bowman's capsule. But the combination of the two, again, is a renal corpuscle. I know that's confusing, a lot of terminology, but again, watch this over and over and you'll get it. That's why I wanted to lecture on this. Now, this is basically a renal corpuscle blown up. So here's the pod around it, and here's the capillaries inside. But here's what I want you to know. Coming into those capillaries, this is kind of unique, because in chapter 15 we said we had arteries that became arterioles, that merged into venules, into veins, and then went back to the heart. Here we have what we call an afferent. If you remember in the nervous system last semester, we called the sensory division the afferent, A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T, meaning it's going to something. This is the afferent arteriole. This is the efferent going away. So that's a little odd. Usually you have arterial, venule, then vein. Here we have arterial coming in and arterial going out. But this mess is the glomerulus, or glomerular capillaries. So you have blood flowing to thousands of these to be basically turned into urine. That's stupid. To be filtered. But this is part of urine formation. You're going to come in here and it's going to, you'll see this in the chapter notes. There's 3 parts of urine formation. Filtration, which is where the filtrate comes out of this. Then we have reabsorption, and then finally we have secretion. What we secrete ends up in the urine. So the afferent brings it in to the glomerulus, or glomerular capillaries. The afferent brings it in, A-F-F-E-R-N-T. The efferent, E-F-F-E-R-N-T, takes it away. So as the filtrate comes out, this is the first part of the proximal convoluted tubule right here. It's just not convoluted yet. That's the first part of it. It will come out here, go down through the loop of Henle, back up as the distal convoluted tubule. So proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule, afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole, glomerulus, or glomerular capillaries. I know that's fast, but hopefully you can watch it as many times as you want. And I think that's it for the urinary, but I want to go on down into the endocrine. Now, what I want you to do with this, I want you to label what the glands' names are, but that's not what I'm going to ask you on the lab test. When I post the little chart on Blackboard, you will use information on that chart on this diagram, and I'll give you an example of that. But let's first label these, and we're not going to label all of them because we're not going to show the hypothalamus any love at all. And if you remember last semester, we said on the chart for the nervous system that the hypothalamus was the highest center of autonomic function. And autonomic function, and I think I said at that time, it's because it controls the endocrine glands. So, but we're not, for the most part, what happens in the hypothalamus, it releases hormones that cause the release of other hormones. So I want you to focus on what I put on the chart, the actual hormones, and not the ones that make them release them. And again, that chart, hopefully I'll have that on there by this evening, which could be before you even get this review if it takes 16 hours to upload, if that makes any sense. All right, the first line is pointing to the pineal gland or pineal body, and you should remember that from last semester. We're going to, the second line here, we're going to skip because that's the hypothalamus. The third line is the pituitary gland, which you should, I think we talked about that in relation to the skeletal system. Fourth line down is one line. It's pointing to the thyroid gland. Fifth line down is a split line pointing to glands that are attached to the thyroid. These are the parathyroid glands. Para means around. This sixth line, I'm not going to keep, I'll say sixth line. This is the thymus gland. Seventh line is the adrenal glands, or also known as suprarenal, above the renal. Next line down, pancreas. And then these, we're not going to label because you have a take-home that you looked up the hormones related to these ovaries and the testes. So you can omit those, but I'm also going to say the kidney also functions as an endocrine gland, but that'll probably be covered in chapter 20 rather than chapter 13. So let me give you an example. Even though you don't have that chart to look at, you will. On that chart, for example, I have that and this should be, once you get that chart and you read it, we have actually talked about most of what's going to be on that chart beginning in 137 and going through 139. Some of it you've had to learn yourself because it's been an online class, but most of those have been talked about with the exception of 3 or 4 maybe, and some of the conditions I'm going to put on. But say I point to this, the 4th line down. You should remember this. I may say, and put an A there, that is pointing to the thyroid gland. So if I put an A there and say, name the hormone that is involved in calcium homeostasis. Name the hormone at A, produced by gland A, that is involved in calcium homeostasis. And that will be on your chart. It is calcitonin. And you should remember that from last semester. Calcitonin takes excess calcium, or when you have excess calcium, it stimulates osteoblasts to build bone to store that. So you won't be naming the gland on any of these. You're going to be naming something related to it. So keep that in mind. And again, that'll come off the chart that I put on Blackboard. The other thing, while I'm scrolling down to the last 3 diagrams, is that actually last 2 is that I probably won't review chapter 13 because it's all going to be on that chart, off of that chart. So that'll make it a little more streamlined. I'll try to do a review on chapter 20 and get it posted. All right, this is the female diagram. So let's go through it real quick. I don't want you to know all these lines. In fact, we're going to streamline it. So 4th line down is the cervix. Let's go on around here. Last line, labia majora. Next line up, labia minora. Next line up, clitoris. Next line up, vagina. Then on the female, I want you guys to know, even though it's a white silhouette, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line up is the bladder. And you can see that the uterus lies on top of the bladder. That's why you guys have to go to the bathroom so much if you're female. If you're male, you don't have that problem. All right, next line up is the body of the uterus. Next line up is the fundus of the uterus. That should sound familiar. We had a fundus of the stomach, so that's the top curved portion. All right, we're going to skip up to here. And I always think the ovary looks like someone holding a football, and it really does. So what is holding that looks like a bunch of fingers on a hand are actually called fimbriae, and that has some allusion to your fingers. The next line up, we're going to label the uterine tube, or you can call it the fallopian tube. This is where fertilization takes place. You probably remember that on your take-home if you've turned that in. Last one up is the ovary. So that's all on the female chart, or diagram rather. There may be one more diagram that I have on your test that is not on here. If there is, if it shows up on the test, don't fret. I'll just add a point to your test. I think I have another picture that has this spermatic cord on it, and if that's fine, I'll give you the point. All right, we're going to start on the upper left here again. This particular line is pointing right here. That is the ejaculatory duct. We have 3 parts of the male urethra. It's because they have external genitalia, it's very long. So the second line down is, here's the bladder, which I'm not going to make you know on the male, but the urethra is coming out and passing through this gland, which is the prostate gland, not prostrate. People call it prostrate all the time. Prostrate means to bow down to someone. So look at the spelling on that. But this is the prostatic urethra. Let's go down to this line. It's pointing to this long tube here. That is the Vas Deferens, V-A-S deferens. That should be on your list. Sometimes called the ductus deferens. Let's go on down and let's see, we'll do, this line is the part of the urethra in the penis, so that is the penile urethra. Then let's skip to here. This is the testis, or testes, if you want to put that is fine, but there's only one. Testis is T-E-S-T-I-S, plural use T-E-S-T-E-S. On top of that is the epididymis. Then we come up to this little gland here, which lubricates the penis. That is the bulbourethral gland. Then the last part of the urethra, skip a line, we come up here. There's a little section of the urethra that comes out of the prostate before it goes into the penis. It's called the membranous urethra. Then the gland itself is the prostate gland, and then the seminal vesicle is the top line. That is what actually puts fructose in with the sperm. All right, last thing, I want you to keep your eyes open for the endocrine chart. You will use it for your lab and your lecture. It will be very concise, but the information will be asked on either one. So I'll try to get that posted. And again, you may see that way before you see the review, because the reviews are taking, these video reviews are taking 15, 16 hours to post. So thanks. Bye.